the October 12th, 2020 West Sacramento Environment and Utilities Commission meeting to order. Pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order N2920, members of the Environment and Utilities Commission and staff are meeting via teleconference to reduce the spread of COVID-19. Members of the public have been invited to watch the meeting via Wave Cable Channel 20 or streaming online through the city's website. Tonight's agenda and all agenda item materials are available on the city's website on the Environment and Utilities Commission page. All public comments submitted by 5 p.m. via email to the Environment and Utilities Clerk are available for consideration and are posted on the city website along with the agenda and link to the live streaming video of the meeting so that all commissioners and community members can see the complete text and submittal information. The commission clerk will note the commenters for each item and the comments shall become part of the public meeting record. So with that, we will proceed with tonight's agenda. First, we have the general administration function, part 1, and we have presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda within the jurisdiction of this commission. Are there any public comments for this item?
There are no public comments for this item.
Okay, thank you. Item B, disclosure of ex parte communications. The Environment and Utilities Commissioner should disclose any communications they have had on the agenda items at this time. So has anyone had any communications regarding the agenda items? No? Okay. All right. And with that, we will move to consent agenda, item number 2, item A, consideration of approval of the February 10th Environment and Utilities Commission minutes.
I move that we adopt the minutes as prepared.
And I second that motion. This is Jose Altamirano.
And this is Wayne Matty making the motion.
Okay, thank you. Any objections? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No, okay. Then the minutes are approved.
So this is where we're going to do a roll call, Dana. So I will.
Okay, this is where we do the roll call.
We have Commissioner Hawkins.
Aye.
Commissioner Bevins.
Aye.
Commissioner Green.
Aye.
Commissioner Natty.
Aye.
Commissioner Criswell.
Aye.
Commissioner Santiago Altamiro.
Here. Aye.
Chair Cordero.
Can you say that again? Oh, did you say my name? So I.
Yeah.
I couldn't hear you. Sorry, it cut out. Is that everyone? Okay. We will move to the regular agenda. So presentation and discussion of the Mayor's Commission on Climate Change final report. Do we have a report, a staff report on this?
All right. Yes, that's going to come from me. My name is David Tilley. I'm principal planner in the city's community development department, and along with Paulina, one of the members of city staff working on the city's climate objectives. So I have a PowerPoint for you tonight, and we'll put that up. I'll provide some background for your commission. If this was not an effort that any of you have been really tracking closely. This effort began in the fall of 2018. Mayors Cabaldon and Steinberg put together a commission on climate change which had one stated goal, which was to how can we get to carbon zero in Sacramento and West Sacramento by 2040. This commission was put together. It was staffed by City of Sacramento staff as well as West Sacramento staff. Several members of West Sacramento City staff participated in this effort, and they met. This overall commission met 9 times, starting in the fall of 2018, and that they just finished in June of this year. So their last 2 or 3 meetings were also via Zoom since the pandemic began. Next slide, please, Ben. So I think that matters of climate have been pretty much in the forefront for us in our region and throughout the state. I think the slide in the picture in the upper left pretty much tells the story of our state this year. And then the slides on upper right and lower right tell the story of where our state was 4 or 5 years ago when we were in the most serious drought conditions. And then, worst case scenario for us around here is the lower left, where we are certainly at risk for flooding. This particular presentation was provided to the City Council a couple of months ago, and it was initially provided by the chair of the commission, Ann Stasball, and then Kate Neese, who's the executive director of the Local Government Commission, who was really sort of the orchestrated the whole commission process. So we made a presentation to City Council, the same one you're going to hear tonight. It was very well received by the council, but at that particular time, they did not provide us specific direction yet to start working on some of the recommendations that are in this report. But we certainly anticipate that they will, once that time is right. So I brought this presentation to the city's planning commission also, and now tonight I'm happy to be before the Environment and Utilities Commission to provide this information to you, sort of as this will be the beginning of many things to come, I suspect. So I'm trying to get to the commissions where matters of climate are in their domain, so we can try to start setting the stage for where we're going to go with our climate work in West Sacramento. So next slide, please, Ben. So this is the roster of all the commissioners that were on that commission. It's important, to note that these are all folks that come from a wide variety of backgrounds. Some are elected officials, including our representative, Councilman Ledesma. But you can see there's representatives from utility companies, business, the higher education world, advocacy groups, developers, health entities, other government entities. So it really was set up to be as broad of a base of commissioners as possible. And for the most part, most of the folks here that were on this, they were not what you would say particularly experts in this particular arena, but they all brought their own perspective and knowledge base, and I think everyone learned a lot from each other on this effort. So next slide, please. So the commission meetings, the commission itself met 9 times, but there were numerous more of what I call, for lack of a better term, staff level meetings that were open to anyone to attend, that were really where the sausage making was occurring. And so there were numerous meetings about different topics. They were typically attended by 20, 30, 40, 50 people from all walks of life, trying to work on these particular matters. And through this process, a lot of other ideas emerged that we didn't necessarily start off with. But one thing that was kept on the forefront through this whole effort was the challenge that both Mayors Cabalden and Steinberg presented to all parties concerned with this, which was to be bold and aggressive. And because that's truly what was needed if we're going to get to carbon neutrality in our region in the next 20 to 30 years. So this really was a big task. This was only supposed to be about a 6 to 9 month effort. It turned out to be about an 18-month effort. But the end result, at least in my view, turned out to be, well worth the investment by all the parties concerned here, many of which were just taking time out of their normal day jobs to attend a meeting like this. I know it's kind of weird seeing a lot of people sitting around a table right now, but this is how it began. And fortunately, most of those, what they call Technical Advisory Committee or TAC meetings, most of those did wrap up before COVID came, because this would have obviously not been possible under COVID. Next slide, please. So the report, which we provided in the packet, really is based around some foundational principles, equity, and then three of these sectors, built environment, which is, as it states, buildings and structures, mobility, and then community health and resiliency. Equity is emerged as being, I think, the primary theme and lens that this work through, but that's not how it started. It started off very technical. The built environment TAC meetings were the first ones that happened. I attended those. They were hosted by SMUD, and it was very technical. A lot of architects and engineers in the room, and quite frankly, some of that definitely went over my head. But as it emerged, and as we got to some of the other sectors, we realized how important equity is, and how it's particularly critical in the matter of climate. So Ben, next slide, please. So equity became, I think, sort of the overarching lens for this. And these are the three primary recommendations in the report as they relate to equity. This report's at a high level. It's meant to be recommendations to both cities, and both cities have to take this report, digest it, and then determine how they're going to work with it and implement some or all of its recommendations. But equity really became the overarching lens here, and that became very apparent during some of the TAC meetings. I spoke with numerous individuals there, and a lot of things open up my eyes as well on matters in this regard and how they relate back to climate, and how persons of lesser means are going to have a much more difficult time developing climate resiliency than those who are fortunate to have greater means. And there, as you will see as we go through this, there's a lot of long-standing matters that were instituted decades ago that are still things that we're grappling with today in this particular realm. And we'll show, and I mentioned in the report some stuff about tree canopy. I think that was one of the primary examples of where marginalized communities have been impacted or will continue to be impacted in greater numbers from climate. So next slide, please. So in diagram form, this is the whole thing. I call it the football because it kind of looks like a football, but it just shows how equity surrounds everything else and all these other topics that we need to work on. And so the foundational principles are the very high level things, but all live within equity. Next slide, please. So let's go to the next one, please, Ben. Okay, so here's where we're going to start on some of the recommendations under a new green mobility, hierarchy. Active transportation, as it applies in there, that's biking, walking, scooters, anything of that nature. Transit shared mobility, obviously that's our YOLO bus, Sacramento RT, VIA, and other forms to come in the future. And of course, zero emission vehicles are also going to be critically important in the future because the whole point of this is to reduce emissions. And this particular facet of it is particularly important because over half the greenhouse gas emissions in our region come from tailpipes. So if we're going to get to where we need to be, this is an area where we need to take, perhaps the biggest swing at it because this is the biggest, sector, about 55 to 60% in our region. Next slide, please. So this summarizes the recommendations that are in the report. I'm not going to read it all for you, but I want to try to put some of this in a bit of context for you. And maybe perhaps even consider it, just in your own day-to-day lives. So, imagine you can actually leave your house again, and imagine needing to take 3 out of every 10 trips you take out of your house, on a bike or walking or something of that ilk. And that would be by 2030, so less than 10 years, almost just about 9 years or thereabouts. And then increasing that by 2045 by 4 out of every 10 trips you take out of your house, or 2 out of every 5 being on a bike, walking, rolling. This is significant. Right now, those trips are 5% or less on average. So this is going to be a significant turnaround, and this will have all kinds of ripple effects in terms of our infrastructure, how we prioritize, biking and walking versus cars. All kinds of things could permutate out of that. This is a 30,000-foot level. We don't have all the answers yet as to how we're going to accomplish these things, but this is sort of at least the roadmap, if you will, that has been developed to get us to carbon neutral. And I know these look like round numbers, and they probably are rounded, but there was a tremendous amount of math that went into this in terms of how much GHG reductions would we achieve if we got to these particular targets. So these were not just grabbed out of thin air, at all. There's a lot of math and science behind them. Similarly, in transit use via things of that nature, getting to 3 out of every 10 trips being on the bus or some form of shared mobility option. That also would be a significant jump from where we are now in our region and even here in West Sacramento. And similarly, imagine, and this was put together before the governor's recent edict, but imagine seeing 7 out of 10 cars on the road here in town in less than 10 years, all being zero emission vehicles. That would be a significant shift from where we are now. I'm encouraged by this because I feel like I see more and more zero emission vehicles around all the time, and there's more to come. A lot of the big manufacturers like Volkswagen are they finally now have more options out there for people that didn't even exist a year or two ago, but still getting to that 70%, 7 out of 10 registrations is a huge lift. And then of course this is something we're already working on in different capacities, but starting to electrify fleets. And this is particularly important to us, given that we do have a lot of fleet-based businesses in West Sacramento, and keeping in mind that over half the emissions are coming from tailpipes. This is a very critical aspect for us to be working on. And to get to zero emission vehicles, especially if those are battery electric, we will have to do significant deployment of charging infrastructure all over town to help get there. Right now, it's having an electric vehicle. I'm particularly sensitive to that. There's not a single publicly available charging facility in all of Southport, as an example. That's something we'll need to remedy if we're going to need to get there. And fortunately, the city does have $2.6 million in round numbers from SACOG to develop and install more charging infrastructure around town. And the big reason why we're able to obtain that is we partnered with some of our fleet companies in town to help them also convert to electric. Next slide, please. Built environment. This really is addressing energy use in buildings, commercial and residential buildings. This is another substantial amount of emissions, and it's direct emissions, i.e. from burning natural gas, but then also the production of natural gas and electricity contributes to emissions that we need to work on. So this is on two sides of things. It's how we grow in terms of being in a much more infill basis, but then also working on buildings and trying to move in the direction of going all electric. All electric is certainly nothing new, but it is perhaps in a big all electric communities exist in our region, especially in SMUD territory. But this will definitely be a change, and it will take some doing to get there. But this is particularly important because this can't just be to all new buildings, because by our horizon year, we'll still have about 75% of our existing building stock still extant. So it can't just be new development if we're going to get to our goals. So I know Sacramento right now, this is what the all electric, that is something they've chosen to take on first. And that's something that they're already working on now, is an all electric construction ordinance along the parameters that have been seen here. So this is a big one, and we'll need to work on this. It was a big deal particularly for Council Ledesma, that this be done in the most incentivized, fashion possible, not just be a top-down type thing, especially for existing buildings, where, transitioning to all electric will not be the easiest thing to do, and there'll be cost factors there, which then circles back to the equity football of making sure that we don't put mandates out there that are impossible or impractical for folks, particularly folks of less means, to be able to actually achieve. So, next slide, please. So community health and resiliency. This is sort of more the feel-good stuff, but it's all less hardwired, but it still remains very important as well. I think I mentioned in the report regarding the tree deficient neighborhoods. Some parts of Sacramento right next door to each other, they have beautiful tree canopy, and then right across the street into the next neighborhood, they have virtually none. And it's not a surprise of the demographics in each of those communities. That's got to change, going back to the equity lens. Trees are good for, obviously they filter the air, they provide shade, they certainly do things for this neighborhood value and character, but they also, more shade means more walking, more biking. If you can shade your house, try to keep it cool. It helps use it with your energy use. So we will definitely need to be going in a lot more trees, which may sound easy, but even now we do struggle a little bit to find a place to put trees, especially where they have an irrigation source, and then we have a mechanism for maintenance on those trees. The middle one regarding food security, this is something I feel like in West Sacramento we've already been sort of working on for years, sort of our food hub economic development initiative, trying to recruit companies that are in doing all things food. In our region, we're very well set up, especially with our agricultural heritage, as well as the agriculture that still surrounds us outside the urban core. So the whole point of getting that locally, it's an economic development issue, but that means less transportation, which means less emissions. And then food waste, this is a big matter. I know Paulina has been working on an organics program. This is a big, area of where we want to make, an adjustment here too. And then I think lastly, this is something I'm working on as we speak. And Paulina and I, we are working on where we are most vulnerable in our community, in particular what neighborhoods and why they're most vulnerable. You'd be surprised, just based on even the Callan Virus Crime Index, how much of our community is still considered to be vulnerable under this particular framework. So we have a lot of work to do here, but I, for one, am encouraged because I think we can get some multi-benefits out of many of these things. So next slide, please. So clearly, COVID hit us right in the middle of, as we were going through this process, and it didn't stop us. It actually did prevent, some type of an opportunity, but there's no doubt that the pandemic and its extent has a relation back to climate change. And there was a lot of discussion that, we should stop some of this work because of COVID. And if anything, it was reinforced the need to work on these matters because of this particular pandemic and potential ones to come in the future. So, almost anything you can think of, you can tie it back to climate and climate change in one way or another. And it's usually not more than 2 or 3 steps removed back to climate. So next slide, please. So the commission made recommendations about projects, that could get going right away. These are recommendations to the cities from the commission. Goal was to not just have this be a report that, it gets, collects dust sitting on a shelf in somebody's office, but to really build upon the momentum that this commission created and just the awareness of it, particularly with youth at high school level and college level, which there was a lot of engagement on during this process. And it definitely provides a lot of opportunities in this new era that we're in as well. So there are opportunities here. It's not just gloom and doom. If you just sort of put the blinders on, you can see how maybe things are beyond hope, and that's just not the case. We still have opportunities here, but it's really going to make us need to be looking at doing some things differently, and to make some choices relative to how we budget and how we do other work to make sure we're thinking about things through that climate and equity lens. So next slide, Ben, please. So we're still going to grow in our region. We need to grow. We have a lot more people coming to our region. Our housing number for the period of 2021 to 2029 is 9,500 units. So we are going to continue to grow in West Sacramento as well as the region, but it's going to be a matter of how. And we can do it in a way that accommodates our population needs and our housing growth, but also at the same time advances climate objectives. Growth and climate are not necessarily mutually exclusive or conflicting. So next slide, please. And so with that, that is an overview of the Mayor's Commission final report. I'm happy to have a chance to present it to you this evening. And now I'd be happy to, if you have any questions for me or Paulina, please, we'd be happy to entertain those.
Do any of the commissioners have questions?
I have one question. Just from reading the briefing, it sounded like what staff is really looking for us to do is participate in a workshop sometime soon that would take this in and move forward towards something specific within the jurisdiction of our commission. Is that correct?
That is substantially the case. We need to get some sort of high-level direction for the council first, and then we can start rolling that out to the city commissions as it fits into their domain and start to, make some of this real. So, but this is, definitely, a first step, and I'm hoping that this information, if you hold on to this, eventually, I'm sure I'll be back and we'll be talking about this in a much more, discrete and concrete fashion.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hawkins, did you have something you'd like to add?
Yeah, it's kind of a general question. When we're going through the slides, 2030 sounds like, years and years, decades away, lifetime away, but actually in reality, it comes very fast. Since we do have a lot of commercial and, warehouse and trucking industry here with the port being here, do we have any type of information or reports on the impact it'll have on the businesses that may have to change cars over or change, vehicles and fleets and all that type of thing?
I don't have any numbers here in front of you. I can say that we are, through the SACOG Green region, we are attempting to help provide some of that infrastructure to help those businesses transition, and especially in terms of, fast charging, working with, companies like Ryder, places like that. We're also working with the Sacramento Air District right now, who's helping fund an additional expansion of a CNG fueling facility that's at the west end of West Capitol, to help as a way to bridge to the ultimate goal of electric vehicles, including the heavy duty vehicles. Those are on the way. They're not there yet. But even just moving to CNG from diesel would cut their emissions down 90%. So it would be a huge win. That's something we're working on now. But there's no doubt that this is going to have, there will be costs associated with this, and everyone's fully cognizant of it. And my typical response is, well, what is the cost of not doing it? I think we've all seen with the fires, drought a few years ago, that things are changing, and they're changing perhaps more rapidly than we recognize. So you're right, 2030 feels like it'll be here right around the corner. But the urgency, hopefully that will lead to a sense of urgency.
I'm not quite sure how to raise my hand, if it's okay if I jump in here.
Yeah, that's fine. I think that Commissioner Santiago had a question first that chatted.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I've noticed, I think one of the big opportunities we have is with electric cars. The range has really gotten better throughout the years. I remember 5 years ago, the range was probably 80 miles. These days, the new cars are about over 200 miles on a single charge. So you mentioned that there's a big lack of charging stations in West Sac, but I've also not noticed any sort of participation or any sort of information from our utility partner, PG&E. I have noticed on the other side of the river that SMUD is doing a lot, with electric vehicles and electric charging stations. But have we seen anything from our partner, PG&E, in that area here in West Sac?
We have seen some. I would say not as much as SMUD. But one of the biggest, I think, recommendations in the final report that was voted on unanimously at their very last meeting was that the commission would advocate for and support the city of West Sacramento moving to a more climate-friendly utility. So you can sort of read between the lines there. That is a recommendation that's in there.
Okay.
SMUD was a heavy participating party during this whole process. PG&E was participating as well. There was a very clear contrast between both utility companies and how they operate. And obviously, one is a investor-owned utility, and one is a municipal utility. So they're not quite apples and apples. But there was a very clear distinction there. And I think we've had our struggles with PG&E at times, over the years, particularly in our business community. I have some new streetlights that I can't even get power to right now because PG&E is, they're busy. And so that's an important thing in there. PG&E is doing some work. I know, for example, PG&E has plans in right now to put in a couple chargers out at the 7-Eleven on Lake Road off Enterprise. Mm-hmm. But it's going to take more than a couple of chargers out on the far, western edge of town to get us there. But I think when it comes to chargers, it seems like in the EV community that people often, can still prefer charging at home.
Yeah.
And fortunately, you can get a charger at home for $400 or $500, and put it in your house, and not that hard to do. But still, we need more publicly available infrastructure, particularly for those folks who may have an EV but may live in rental housing or some other capacity where they can't install, their own home charger. So public chargers are still important to have out there for many folks, not just folks that can have their own charger at home. But you're right, the range on vehicles, I think pretty much the standard now is about 250. You know, some of the new Teslas you can get over 300. The new Volkswagens, the new Fords are all 250 to 300 in that range. So I feel like once you get to that point, range anxiety should not be an issue anymore, like it had been with sort of the first and second generations of EVs.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Green, did you have a comment or question?
Yes, thank you. I first wanted to express my appreciation to the commission, the city staff, and all the others who worked on this report. I recognize that this required thousands of hours of work, and this issue is certainly one of paramount importance. So again, my sincere thanks and appreciation to the commission and its partners and all those who have participated in this report. I did want to ask, I believe it's on page 14, where we reference a 2005 greenhouse gas inventory that was done. And then I believe the pie chart on the following page, the emissions by sector pie chart references a 2016 date. I was just curious how frequently those greenhouse gas emission sources for our region are assessed or identified.
Well, they're largely up to each community. And ours was way behind. I'll be the first to admit that. Since this work was done, we have done a new inventory. And it's inordinately complex. I won't pretend to understand all of it. You know, I'm trying to approach this at a policy level, and I have smarter people working for me that know all the numbers. So we have done a recent inventory for our community. This is something I kept bringing up in many of the meetings when we were in with Sacramento on this was, well, one, we're on PG&E. That puts us in a little different category than we are in SMUD. We have a port. Which they don't have, and we are over here in Yolo County, different world than Sacramento, but yet we're still part of the Sacramento world, and we're influenced by the Sacramento world. How many folks live in West Sacramento, maybe go into Sacramento to work, and vice versa. So, because right now we export so many workers and import so many workers, we're really skewed there. So we've done it. We have a new inventory. We'll be hopefully early next year sort of rolling out our larger climate action plan effort. Our participation in the Mayor's Commission was meant to inform our work, and it has done that. And we are now moving more or less full speed ahead now that that process is done. And one of the things Pauline and I are now working on is bringing that 30,000-foot report sort of down to the ground in the real world here in West Sacramento. It's a very high-level report. The commission itself elected to have 3 primary recommendations in each category, when there could have been 10 or 15, in there. But then we would have been doing that forever. And the urgency we did not want to lose. So we had to compromise there, but now the cities can take that information and run with it, and really bring it to bear.
Thank you. And then also with regard to the pie chart on page 15, the emissions by sector again, I'm just curious if animal agriculture was accounted for in any of those categories. I know it's kind of a high level roll up.
Yeah, I'd have to look at some of the technical data to see if that was accounted for. Specifically, a lot of that stuff was sort of aggregated, just to get the, not have that pie be, so many slivers.
Right.
But there's no doubt that agriculture itself, and then animal agriculture has emissions. One of the notes, though, just along those lines, is we're trying to put a positive spin on some of these things, is the CNG project that we're working on. They use renewable CNG, and they get a lot of that from dairy farms. And they have contracts with dairy farms and also landfills to get the methane from them. So there is, that's another area where I see where you have opportunities, where if you're producing those things, that's a feedstock for other more positive activities. So we're learning a lot about that, and had a great call with the Sacramento Air District just this past Friday about that exact topic.
Thank you. And I know you mentioned this just a bit ago. On page 22 of that report, under the foundational principle of advocacy, it talks about the prospect of transitioning West Sac over to our climate supportive utility service. Was that the only item that was specific to our city?
I would say yes, and that was something put forth by Councilmember Ledesma, and that was supported unanimously by the rest of the commission. That that's an economic development issue for us, but it's also very much climate issue for us. It did through this whole process. It really seemed like that we were not having some of the same opportunities as Sacramento has being on SMUD. And so I'm sure that's something that will be explored. It's not the first time, but it became very apparent that if we're going to get to where we need to be, we need a better partner. And if our current partner cannot get there, then we may look elsewhere.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Tilley.
Commissioner Criswell, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have two questions. The first is, when do we project that we'll max out the local electrical grid? I mean, just the physical infrastructure where you actually have to invest or do some kind of change to the wires and the transformers and all the hardware.
That's something that's being really calced out now. I don't have a specific date for you, but it's clear that we can't just flip the switch tomorrow on this stuff. There will need to be some additional investment in those utilities to get that capacity. Fortunately, hopefully we'll get some savings if we're no longer producing natural gas, and hopefully if we're not driving as much anymore. So we'll hopefully see some net gains there. But your point is well taken that we can't just assume that there's unlimited power or capacity in our current system.
Okay. Yeah, and that's understandable. And I know also as you build more facilities, you can also have some local generation with solar panels. And then, of course, storage options will get better as battery technology gets better. So that will help as well.
Yeah, solar is sort of, almost a norm. But the storage you're talking about is really, to me, the next tier of that. And there's already a lot of that happening around. And I think that's the most exciting part of it, and also opportunities for carbon sequestration, or something we're also looking for too. We're going to have to do a lot of different things to get there, and that the energy grid and storage and the local production, cogen, things like Valley Clean Energy, all of that will have to be all work together to get us there.
Thank you. My next question is related to kind of the outside world. Is there kind of a process or a thought process or something where we're kind of benchmarking and comparing notes with other regions, other cities, other states? Because, I mean, obviously it's a global problem and we're working at a local level to do the things we need to do, and a whole bunch of other regions need to do as well. So is there any kind of mechanism of, networking and being in touch with what other regions are doing?
Yes, we are part of the YOLO climate, the YOLO County-based climate group, which then is a subset of the regional climate group, which then is a subset of the statewide climate group. So we're participating at all of these levels. Part of this process, the city did join the regional climate partnership. I don't know why its name is escaping me right now. And then that's a subset of the statewide one. So we have something, we're doing our work, then we're working with our counterparts in Yolo County, and then we're working with our counterparts in the region, and then by virtue of that, we're working with our counterparts statewide. So we absolutely, cannot solve it in West Sacramento by itself, but we're going to do our part, but we're obviously trying to learn from other communities that may be a couple of steps ahead of us in this regard, but also trying to recognize our characteristics here. There's only so many cities that have ports. There's only so many cities that are our size, yet have some of our issues that we have to grapple with, particularly like, flood risk, as an example. That's, you hear a lot about sea level rise, in coastal areas, very important, less critical to us. But other things, droughts. So some of the work we did with the Yolo County group was really focused on more of the Central Valley, Sacramento Valley, our climate, and the issues we have here. And with the goal of we created sort of a toolkit that was really meant to hopefully be usable by numerous communities that are in a climate, akin to ours.
Do we have any other questions? I don't see anybody's hand raised or anything in the chat. Questions, comments? All right. Well, thank you. I'm going to move on to our next item then. So
thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you. Thank you for talking. Our general administration function part 2, our calendar, the next regular meeting is scheduled for December 14th, 2020. And then do we have any reports from the city staff?
Yes, thank you, Chair Cardano. This is Paulina Benner, Environmental Services Manager. Just a quick announcement. I'll have more information that I'll email to you at a later date. We are going to host a virtual America Recycles Day event on Saturday, November 14th. We're partnering with Waste Management on that event. So once I have all the details, I'll send out a flyer. Just wanted to alert you to that. I believe that the hours are, gosh, I apologize for not having the hours in front of me, 10 to 1. But again, I'll have some more information this week that I'll email to you all. So we're focusing this event on reminding our residents about recycling right, what goes in the recycling container, since we have a pretty big issue with contamination. And then also reminding our residents that we do actually accept food scraps in our yard waste containers. They're no longer just for yard waste. It's something that a lot of residents still aren't aware of. So we have 2 main focus areas, but the event will have a lot of other fun things for kids. There will be some Ask an Expert opportunity where you can submit questions to somebody from Waste Management and talks more about the recycling market and why different things are or are not recyclable and things like that. So it should be pretty fun. It's kind of a shift doing something like this virtually, but I'm hoping it goes well. That's all I have.
Great, thank you. That actually sounds like fun. So, all right, future agenda item requests by members of the commission. Does anybody have any future agenda items? No. Okay. Well, with that, I'll close tonight's Environment and Utilities Commission meeting. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you in December.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.